Look at this paper. Just look at it. My friend retired back in 2007 with $612,000 in his account. His advisor, some kid in a slim fit suit, told him to be careful. He said, "Jim, don't touch the principal. Watch every single dime like it is your last. Adjust for inflation and pray to God the market doesn't cough." So Jim did exactly what he was told. For 16 long years, he lived like a ghost in his own house. He skipped the vacations. He drove that beat-up Ford truck until the floorboards rusted out and he could see the asphalt rushing by under his boots. He followed the famous bulletproof 4% rule. He thought he was being a responsible man, a provider. Last week, we grabbed a coffee at a Greasy Spoon over in Youngstown. Jim opened his phone with shaky fingers. That $600,000, it is now $1.8 million. Read that again, $1.8 million. He spent 16 years pinching pennies, eating canned soup, and living in fear, and he is 3 times richer today than the day he quit. You think that's a success story? You think he won? No, that is not success, folks. That is a glitch. That is a fundamental systemic failure in the way we've been taught to survive. The math is broken. The suits in New York have been lying to you through their teeth. They want you obsessed with optimizing your spreadsheet while you are bleeding the only asset you can't ever earn back, your time. While Jim was staring at red and green lines on a screen, his life was passing him by outside the window. He was waiting for a permission slip to be happy that never came. I am the wealth mechanic, and today we are tearing down the engine of your retirement. We are going to find out why you are dying rich but living poor. Meet Spreadsheet Steve. Now, Steve is a smart guy, or at least he thinks so. He's a retired engineer who spent 40 years building things that last, but now he's building a cage. Every Saturday morning, while the bright sun is shining over the Ohio River, Steve is down in his basement. The only light comes from a flickering monitor reflecting off his glasses. He's running Monte Carlo simulations for the 1,000th time. He's obsessed with a 99% success rate. He's guarding a perimeter that doesn't exist while his biological engine is redlining. This is the glitch, and it is eating you alive. Now, let us get under the hood and look at the actual diagnostics. The financial industry treats the 4% rule like it is a law of physics, like gravity. But I'm telling you, it is not. It is just an expensive insurance policy against an asteroid strike that never hits. A guy named Michael Kitces, a real heavyweight in this game, dug through 115 years of rolling 30-year periods. We are talking from the horse and buggy days of 1870 all the way to the digital age we are living in now. He looked at every crash, every war, every depression. And do you know what the diagnostics revealed? In only 12 out of those 115 periods did a retiree actually end up with less than they started with. 12. That's a 10% chance of seeing your pile shrink. Just 10%. But here's the kicker that the suits in their mahogany offices won't tell you. 90% of the time, you finish with more money than you started with. 2/3 of the time, your wealth more than doubles. And half the time, you retire with $600,000 and you die with nearly $2 million. Think about that for a second. You spent money for 3 long decades. You traveled, you ate, and somehow you tripled your net worth while you were sleeping. You are insuring your life against a financial apocalypse that has a 90% chance of never happening. You were building a military-grade tank just to drive to the grocery store because you saw a scary movie about a war back in 1926. This isn't financial planning, folks. It is a mathematical prison. You are optimizing for the one guy in 100 who gets hit by a lightning bolt, while the rest of us are rotting away in a cage of our own making. We are so terrified of the 1% failure that we are failing 100% at actually living. The math doesn't lie, but the people selling you the fear, they definitely do. They want you scared because scared people are easy to manage. Scared people keep their money in the vault where the fees keep rolling in. It's time to stop looking at the shadow on the wall and start looking at the engine block. The numbers are screaming for you to live, but you are too busy checking the locks on your cell door. Let me tell you about Jim. Jim was a heavy machinery mechanic, just like me. He spent 35 years with black grease under his fingernails and the smell of iron in his lungs. He worked double shifts at the plant so he could save every single penny. By the time he hit 65, he had $900,000 sitting in his Vanguard account. Jim had one dream, just one, a small sailboat to cruise the Great Lakes during the summers. Nothing fancy, just a $60,000 boat in the open water. But his advisor sat him down, looked at a colorful chart, and shook his head. He told Jim the market was too volatile. He told him to wait just a few more years for the portfolio to stabilize. He told Jim to keep his hands off the principal or the whole machine might seize up. Jim listened. He was a good soldier. He waited. 2 years later, his wife was diagnosed with Parkinson's. Suddenly, the open water didn't matter anymore. She couldn't step onto a boat safely even if it was made of solid gold. The window of opportunity didn't just close, it slammed shut. Today, Jim is 82 years old. He is sitting on $1.4 million in that same account. But the boat? That boat is still docked in his imagination, rotting away. Here is the truth the spreadsheets hide from you. $1 spent at 67 on a trip to Italy with a healthy spouse has 10 times the utility, 10 times the life of that same dollar sitting in an account when you were 89 and stuck in a wheelchair. Money has a shelf life, folks. Its power to buy happiness decays every single year your body ages. You are optimizing for your bank balance while your capacity for joy is leaking out of a hole in the tank. You think you're being patient, you think you're being wise, but you're actually just mourning a life you haven't lived yet. Don't let your dream become a ghost boat, because you can't take the $1 million with you when the engine stops, but I promise you, you will definitely take the regret. Stop waiting for a perfect moment that doesn't exist. Grab the wrench. It is time to fix the life you have left.
All right, pick up your tools. It is time for the overhaul. We are breaking your money down into 3 distinct systems, just like a powertrain. If you want this machine to run until you hit 100 without smoking, you need to understand how they work together. System 1 is your baseline. Think of this as the oil and the coolant in your engine. It is not optional. This is your housing, your groceries, and your basic health insurance. For most of you hardworking folks with Social Security, this system is already pressurized and ready to go. This is your survival floor. You don't mess with this and you don't overbuild it either. It just needs to be steady. Now, System 2 is where the magic happens. This is your quality of life. This is the turbocharger on the engine. The travel, the hobbies, those big family dinners at the steakhouse where you pick up the tab for everyone. This is the fuel that was meant to be burned. This is the money you spend aggressively while your biological engine is still running hot and you can actually enjoy the ride. The industry wants you to starve the turbo to save for a rainy day, but I am telling you, if you don't burn this fuel now, it just evaporates. System 3 is your legacy and your buffer. This is the spare tire in the trunk. Money you leave for the kids or for that absolute worst case scenario when you were 95. The big lie? The suits want you to treat your entire life like it is System 3. They want you to live on a spare tire for 30 years. That is insane. Who drives 1,000 miles on a spare? Here is the mechanics rule. Spend like a lion on System 2 while you still have the health to enjoy it. Be moderate on System 1 and stay lean on System 3. If the market takes a hit, you don't touch your baseline. You just dial back the turbo for a year. You skip the big cruise to Alaska and you work on the garden instead. You adjust, you adapt, you survive. Run your own numbers through a real simulation, not those junk calculators at your local bank. Understand that a 6% withdrawal is not reckless. It is a calculated adjustment for a life well lived. Stop being a janitor for your bank account, scrubbing the floors of a vault you will never use. Start being the lead engineer of your remaining years. Grab the wrench. It is time to loosen the bolts on your joy.
Take a look at your hands for a second. Go on, look at them. They have worked hard for 40 years. They have built a life, raised kids, and fixed 1,000 broken things. They are tired, but they are honest. But remember this. When the engine finally stops and the garage door closes for the very last time, nobody is going to stand over your grave and read your bank balance out loud.
They won't talk about your safe withdrawal rate or your perfectly diversified portfolio. They will talk about that time you took the grandkids to the coast and stayed up late watching the stars. They will talk about the way you laughed in that dusty steakhouse in Texas, the stories you brought back from the places you were once too afraid to visit, but you went anyway because you finally chose to be brave. You have a choice right now. You can die with a perfect set of numbers on a cold piece of paper, or you can die with a soul full of stories that will live on long after you are gone. I know which one the wealth mechanic is choosing. I'm choosing the life, not the spreadsheet. What about you? Are you going to keep polishing a trophy you can't take with you? Or are you going to put this machine in gear and see what it can really do before the sun goes down? Now, I know some of you are thinking, but mechanic, what about my house? That is my biggest asset, right? Well, next time, I'm going to show you why that big, beautiful house you call an asset is actually a high-interest prison cell that is keeping you broke and stagnant. I will see you in the shop for the next overhaul. Grab the wrench. It is time to be free.